Welcome to the Flying Octopus Podcast, offering a new perspective on Red Wings hockey, as well as all the important news from around the NHL. And now, here are your hosts, Tony Wolak, Devin Little, and Evan Sabrin.
So guys, I had an 11 o'clock game last night, and I normally go to bed at 9:30. So this was a brand new experience for me. Like, ever since we had a kid, my bedtime has been significantly earlier than where it once was. So like, I'm driving to the rink. I'm exhausted. It's a long day in the office. And, just not looking forward to, being up so late, waking up early, going back to work. It just, thinking about the next day, it already exhausts me about the next day. And then like at a block or two before the rink, like Stunned Like My Daddy by Lil Wayne and Birdman came on. And it brought me back to junior hockey, back to 2007. I know I'm dating myself here, but I don't know. It reminded me of the fun I had and just going to the rink and yeah, we had late practices some nights. I wouldn't get home till 2 a.m, have to go to high school in the a couple hours after that. And I don't know, it was a complete mindset shift for me, right? I went from this, I'm already tired, to, you know what? I don't have fun. I love this game. There's a reason why I'm playing this game at 11 p.m. on a Wednesday night in the middle of the work week. And we won. It went to overtime, so the game was a lot longer than I anticipated, but we still won. So I don't know. It goes to show how a mindset shift can alter how things progress into the future. But I don't know. I think at this point, if the Red Wings don't have some sort of mindset shift or something even more drastic, this could get ugly pretty quick. But then again, they had a rough December last year, so who knows what the future holds. But anyway, welcome to the latest episode of the Flying Octopus. I'm here with your co-hosts, Evan Sabrin, Devin Little, and George Malik. Listen, guys, the Buffalo game on Monday night, it was exhilarating. They came back. They won. You saw the resiliency that this team, showed so often last season. But then playing against the Flyers on Thursday night, it was not it. It was not it whatsoever. So we're kind of in a tough spot heading into Saturday night's game against the Maple Leafs. But for me, I'm trying to be positive. I'm trying to have a mindset shift, and hopefully, the Red Wings follow suit, right?
I'm struggling in the positive department. It's hard not to struggle in the positive department. And by the way, before I forget, I have to say it now, is that we need to get t-shirts made for this podcast. It says December sucks. And we'll put the show logo on it, because December just has been a brutal month already to start for this year, and is going back to last year as well. This team is seems like this is the place where they really free fall, and it's not entertaining, and it's hard to come up with ideas for a podcast when the story keeps repeating itself week after week. George, let's start off with you and kind of some things you saw tonight, because my mind's still racing from a game and trying to comprehend how this team's competing and where they go moving forward.
I've got the stat sheet in front of me. They gave up 36 shots, and let's do some math. Oh God, they didn't tell me there was going to be math. 58 shot attempts against. Talbot was good. I will say that. 2 of those goals by Scott Lawton were empty netters. We had Raymond, Sider, Larkin, DeBrincat all -3. I didn't see Simon Edvinsson come over the bench after about 5 minutes remaining in the third period, so I'm a little worried about that. Christian Fischer led the team in shots with 4. Sider had 3, and he had another 5 attempts. And after that, it was a bit downhill. But it's the Philly curse. It's the Philly hex. I'm not exactly sure what goes on when the Red Wings hit the Wells Fargo center ice, but maybe John Tortorella's got some sort of spooky thing going on with them because the Flyers do things backwards. They have the coach address the media, and then they have the morning skate, and then it seems to work for them. And it's about the only thing that seems to work for the Red Wings in Philadelphia is losing. Given what did we got? What was it that we got? We figured. Devin, you had the numbers.
Yeah, it's 2 regular season wins in darn near 30 years in Philly, which is insanity. Obviously, that doesn't count or take into account the Stanley Cup final, which is why it's the regular season games. But like you said, I don't know what demon follows this team whenever they cross the border into Pennsylvania and into Philadelphia specifically. But it's yikes. Just I guess to add on to takeaways from this game, it's just not good hockey right now. And I know that's not a minority opinion. I'm seeing a lot of people, whether it's on social media or whatever, just basically saying they're falling out of love with the game because of what they're seeing on the ice right now. And I don't know that you can come up with a harsher critique than that. I know me, I don't know that I'm falling out of love with the sport, but this is tough to watch. And it's tough to like you said, Evan, it's tough to watch it and then get hyped up for a podcast when it's just the same story and night after night, day after day. Something's got to give. I don't know what. I don't know that it's just one thing that needs to give. I don't know that it's one thing that will change and fix everything. But as things are, it's not interesting hockey. It's lifeless hockey. It's not Red Wings hockey. It's not exciting hockey. It's a product that I just can't rationalize spending the kind of money that you have to spend to go see these games. It's just not entertaining, quite frankly.
I feel like we're still every game you see on social media, people reacting is that this is it for Lalonde. This is his last game. That had to do it. That had to be the game. And that's how I felt after the San Jose loss. But there's been several significant losses since, and man, I don't know what it's going to take around here. There has to be some kind of change, whether it's personnel or coaching. But right now it looks like coaching because this team is lost. And I've said this 1,000 times again, and it's hard to come up with new content when we're telling the same story over and over. I don't see any passion out of Lalonde. I see a guy who's defeated. And when you look at this team, and George, I know we mentioned this earlier about Maurice Seider and Dylan Larkin being hit the same questions. I mean, they're literally dealing with the media like we're trying to come up with new content because they don't have an answer either, and it's frustrating and it's hard. And I really thought that Buffalo game, like maybe there was a slight chance that the tides could turn here. As we all saw, Moritz Seider was an absolute beast in that game. He looked like he was ready to, really take it to the next level and knocking people over left and right. I thought maybe there's a chance that could be a turning point. It was all fired up. Everyone was excited to see Sebastian Cossa get in the game and actually pull out a win for the Red Wings. And maybe that was a stepping stone to something better here down the stretch. But again, came out flat here on Thursday night. And it's what's the answer? We talk about the same thing every week. What's the answer? What's the solution? And I don't see one in sight right now. And I think at some point the coaching change has to happen. Now they play in Toronto Saturday, Hockey Night in Canada. Tony, I mean, how long is this leash? I mean, how much longer are we going to keep saying the same thing over and over till we see a change?
Saturday's game against Toronto, I think that while that game may not decide what happens next, I think that's going to be a turning point for the Red Wings. Like, either they win and they continue and they hopefully build on that momentum, or they lose and change happens. That change, it could be something simple like lineup tweaks or strategy changes to the penalty kill or the forecheck or what have you, or emphasizing more like offense with a sacrifice to the defensive game. Or it could be, bringing in a player from, through a trade that helps them with their dump and chase strategy. Someone in the top 6 with maybe a little bit of size that can complement the forwards there a little better. Or it could be a coaching change, that things are simply not working. And it's time for just a new voice in the room. Even if the changes aren't significant right away with the new voice in the room, it's someone to go in there and just kind of help everyone just drop their shoulders down and get them like having fun with hockey again. Because like what we're seeing on the ice, especially with the Flyers game, that wasn't fun hockey. That was following a lackluster game plan to a T, not thinking outside the box, and just trying to fit like a square peg in a round hole. And it didn't work.
30 games in. I mean, I don't know how much more it'll take for a change to move. And that's why the dynamic that we'll never know that what goes on behind the scenes between Yzerman and Lalonde in those discussions, like how far are we going to take this until enough is enough? And it's frustrating when you see other teams who are already, making moves 20 games into the season. And yet this team has underperformed at almost in every aspect of the game, and yet we're still not seeing anything. I think that's the hardest part, and I think that's the most frustrating part. Anytime you look at Red Wings social media now, it's the same narrative over and over. Get rid of Lalonde, get rid of Laurent, Sherratt, Petrie, this, that. At some point, you're not going to lose the players. You can't move those players. The thing you can change is the voice in the room, because right now that voice in the room does not appear to be working.
One thing I do want to add about the Flyers game here on Thursday night was like John Tortorella is the ultimate like motivator coach. He's not like the strategist, the X's and O's kind of guy. He is a straight up motivator. He knows how to just get into his players' heads, get them to execute, and get them to follow the game plan. They are a pure effort team. And to see them just dominate the Red Wings in terms of effort, it was just kind of disheartening. Like, sure, there were spurts here and there where the Red Wings, put up like a solid effort against the Flyers, but it just goes to show that like if you're going to be a dump and chase team, but you're not going to be an effort team, there's clearly a misalignment here, and something needs to give. You need to either shift your strategy or you shift like the person who's creating the strategy, for lack of a better term.
It's the thing that frustrated me so much was that you go from, Monday's game against Buffalo, where they were so passionate and physical, and there was secondary scoring. Thank Gord, there was secondary scoring for the first time in forever, which bought Husso and bought Kosa some time and some goals against to sort of to be able to overcome any sort of inconsistencies in the goaltending, and then you go back to robot hockey. You go back to, okay, we're gonna dump it in. We might chase. We might not chase. It looks like the guys are just hammering their thumb into submission as opposed to hammering a nail. I was thinking, okay, where has Yzerman gone in terms of change before? And usually over the last couple of seasons, there's been a waiver claim or a small trade. If you were to look at, for example, go back all the way to Brendan Perlini for Alec Regula back in the day, there's a small change, and then that leads up to bigger changes. And I'm kind of hesitant to lean on any source because the Red Wings are a nuclear submarine. They don't really have any air bubbles coming up in terms of, how do I want to put it? In terms of any sort of, pardon the uhs and the ums, folks, but it's difficult to explain how airtight this team is in terms of rumors, in terms of hot takes, juicy anything coming from the team. It's such an ironclad ship, but you kind of look at Pagnotta in the fourth period and you go, okay, is the suggestion that Bob Bugner is probably going to be the coach and then that the team would probably go with an off-season search for more permanent leadership, is that most realistic? And based on Yzerman's sort of meticulous, methodical nature, I think, we're going to look at a small move or two, whether that's a recall or a waiver claim or a small trade. Then you look at a coaching change. Then you look at a bigger trade. And I don't know whether that's going to patch the tire, because the tire is Swiss cheese right now. But at the same time, I think that it's absolutely getting to be imperative, because we're talking about Toronto on Saturday, Toronto twice, over the course of before and after Christmas, those back-to-back games versus Montreal. There's the St. Louis game, and then, of course, the Flyers come into Detroit next week. So change is imperative, whether that comes on the ice or through the front office.
I have to say I agree. I would also say, too, that I agree that if a change is coming, it's not going to be the outside perspective that we were talking about last week. It would be a Bugner promotion, whether it's temporary or permanent. That remains to be seen. But I do think that is the route that they would take. And I think that because that is the route that they would take, it basically kind of serves as a last-ditch effort to change the course of the season. Or if it doesn't change things, it kind of serves as the pulling of the plug. Because if you're asking me today, how they would respond to a Bugner promotion, I think they might get a little, they might have a good week or two where, just a breath of fresh air type of thing, new coach bump, as they like to call it. And then they kind of come back down to earth and they look like, this, if not worse. And then, they start to really lean into tanking and Michael Misa or James Hagens or, whoever they're going to eyeball at the top. But I guess what I'm saying there is I'm not really convinced that a coaching change is what will fix things. If anything, I think that it's basically that would be the team, that would be the organization tapping out. Basically, it's season's done. Basically, I think that they would prefer to succeed with Lalonde behind the bench, and if it's not going to be the case, then it's time to start planning for next season. And then just one more thought too. Big thing that stands out to me is just how much life they showed when Sebastian Cossa entered the game in that Buffalo game. Because Ville Husso, prior to that game, had been playing really, really well. In fact, probably playing the best NHL hockey he's played in a year or two, and that's not even an exaggeration. But the team wasn't scoring in front of him, so they lost every single game that Husso started. And then the Buffalo game happens. Husso has a bad first period. He was probably due for it. Hossa enters in the second period, and not only are the Red Wings able to kind of overcome his first game jitters and the 2 goals that came with them, they're able to win the game. Like I said, the most lively they've looked in the last 2 weeks. Why is that? And I mean, I do think there's something to be said for, go, do your damnedest to get the kid a win. But also like there's got to be more to it. And I think that maybe it was the shock to the system. They weren't necessarily planning on having Kosa in net. And so, they had to radically change how they were approaching that game because, unforeseen circumstances, basically. So I think that this team maybe needs a shock to the system and not just a little tweak around the edges. I do think that Yzerman needs to throw a grenade in the locker room, whether that's firing the coach or making a big trade. Status quo isn't good enough. It hasn't been good enough. I'm not saying anything new here, but the Buffalo game showed me that the team is capable of responding when unforeseen circumstances come their way.
From my perspective, I feel like it was just get the kid a win, play good in front of him. Like the second period, the first period he played, it wasn't that great. Like the team as a whole, it just wasn't solid. The third period, though, fantastic. Love to see that resiliency. And you know what? It was great to see Sebastian Kosa get his first win. That's like, you're right. That was the grenade, as you put it, Devin, thrown onto the team as like, do something crazy, like go out and get a win, go be resilient. And they did it. But like, there's just something that's just not right about the chemistry of this team that like they feel this on a daily basis. There's just been too many like lackluster efforts throughout the season, whether it's just not showing up or the game plan is just beige, for lack of a better term.
That's my concern too, though. It's part chemistry and it's also part talent. And again, it's frustrating not to know what goes on behind closed doors, because does Yzerman have the mindset where he looks at this roster and says, you know what, this is my fault. Maybe I didn't give him the right, Lalonde has a longer leash because Yzerman realizes that he didn't give him the right ingredients, because there's a lack of talent in some areas on this team, especially on the defensive front.
I don't think so. The Yzerman's like his mantra has been incremental growth. If this team was, so close to making the playoffs last year, then growth from that means playoffs or like even closer to the playoffs than we saw last year. Like Devin, I know you mentioned this in a previous episode. There's a reality where the Red Wings are better than the 2023-24 season, but they missed the playoffs just due to external circumstances and, luck. But still, like incremental growth is the goal. And if Yzerman felt that he couldn't achieve incremental growth with the moves that he had made around free agency, he would have done more. Like that has always been the goal, to just, once you hit rock bottom, build slowly up until you reach the playoffs, right? And when you reach the playoffs, do that on a consistent basis, become a Stanley Cup contender. That's the point of the rebuild. But they are not even on the same plane as they were last year. And I know like the term regression is thrown around a lot, but like this team should be playing better with the talent that they have. If there's going to be regression, it's moving up to the mean instead of down. And what we've seen on the ice so far has just not been what anyone has expected in terms of offensive output. Like defense has been better, and that's been great, and it's been fine. But like the offense has not been good whatsoever. And that is like, I don't know, when I'm watching the game, I am getting so frustrated watching the offense and just having no creativity whatsoever. So that kind of makes me think like there needs to be a change in some regard, bringing in a different player to throw into the lineup that kind of changes things, kind of mixes up the lines, getting like finding some sort of, chemistry, or it's just a new coach at the helm who can kind of unlock this team. Frankly, I don't think it's Bob Bugner. I think the Red Wings should be looking external to try to, as I said, unlock this team, unlock the offensive potential. And there are good coaches out there who are, free agents, for lack of a better term. And
don't say Quenville.
I won't. Big Todd McClellan fan. But there are coaches like Todd McClellan who are out there, who are available, who would be a great addition if they're brought in midseason. Just because you fire a coach doesn't mean you need to have an interim for the remainder of the season. Look at the Blues. They fired Drew Bannister and hired Jim Montgomery for a 5-year contract? Like, who's to say the Red Wings can't do something similar for like a Todd McClellan or another coach for that?
Or Jay Woodcroft, perhaps.
Both. They have a history.
Or both, literally. And that's where I wanted to throw in, the other concept of throwing a grenade in the locker room is obviously with the locker room itself and talking about the players. I don't think that they necessarily need. They don't need a blockbuster trade or a blockbuster recall. But at this point, to bring in another Marco Casper, somebody who's a good worker bee, or to bring in somebody with a big mouth. I know that it's a quiet team. We keep on hearing, it's a quiet team. No David Perron, no Shane Gostisbehere. It's a quiet team, and I think of. I'm the bad injury news. Devin might be able to expound upon this with not Marco Casper, but with Carter Mazer, and the sprained ankle from hell that he's dealing with. But to get either a good worker bee or somebody that is an inspirational type figure. Whether you pluck them off the waiver wire or whether you make an astute trade and you say, we're looking for this locker room guy that can maybe stir things up in here, to just get them out of this robot hockey mode, because it reminds me of the Blashill era and the trust the process BS that we had to listen to while the team struggled so very hard through not being able to find a spark. And that's what I'm really looking for.
And I would say too that just recent news kind of suggests that Yzerman would agree that a grenade needs to be thrown in the locker room, and he doesn't necessarily think it has to be a blockbuster trade, like you said, George. Just last week, we were talking about how the Red Wings were very much in those Jacob Trouba talks, right? That's the type of move we're kind of talking about. If it's not going to be a coaching change, bring in a figure that will address a need and will add something to the locker room. And that's what Trouba would have been. Now, obviously that didn't happen, but I think that tells us that Yzerman is looking at, he's not sitting on his hands and just kind of hoping that things will magically turn around. It's just there's 31 other teams in the league, and they're all trying to do the same things he is. So, even if you try to do things, it's not always going to happen. I think that, like you said, George, I love that you brought up Mazer, because this I feel so bad for him right now, because obviously he's not playing, and that's bad in its own right. But also this is like a perfect moment where if he was healthy, you give him the call up, because he is the type of player you're talking about. He is that type of player that will muck it up and, get into other people's heads and chirp and do all that good stuff. And will try to score some greasy goals, but he also has some underrated skill. Like he brings a lot of what we're talking about this team needs right now. And also there's the youthful the youthful energy that Casper and Edvinson and all the other kids bring to the team too. If he was healthy, I would be banging the table right now that Carter Mazer needs to be brought up right now, but he is not. And I think that's why Eisenman is looking for some sort of help outside of the organization. And unfortunately, he's running out of time for it to be a trade. If he still wants to try to save this season, if there's no trade out there, we're kind of keep coming back to this, and I feel bad, but it's got to be behind the bench.
Do you guys think there's a world where Steve Yzerman just doesn't address this? And it's, I don't think any NHL team really goes out there to tank. I don't see that. I don't see it when you look at the character of a lot of the players, excuse me, on this team. Is there a world where Yzerman's just lets this fly out and sees, and they can add one of those top guys in the draft lottery this year? Because it's hard to have any optimism for the rest of this season. Is Patrick Kane going to be moved? Are players going to be moved out for draft picks? Is that something you think that would go through a GM's mind, especially a GM like Steve Yzerman? It's something I kind of struggle with, but at the same time, if those players are traded or if this team continues to struggle, do you let it slide? Because I don't think, like I said, I don't think there's purposeful tanking. That's why a lottery system was created, so there wouldn't be purposeful tanking. But is there a world where you could honestly think that Steve Yzerman could just let things fly and let it play out like this? And maybe there is a James Hagan at the end of the rainbow. Maybe he is a Porter Martone, Anton Frondel, one of those possibly franchise-altering players. I don't see it, but I'm just curious what you guys think about stuff like that.
I don't know. I don't. Like, my perspective, like, just kind of ties back to what Yzerman has always said, and like I said earlier, it's incremental growth. His expectations are a lot higher this season than they've been in previous years for the Red Wings. And to see them, fall way short of what he was looking for me, it's, the goal is to make the playoffs, and then you reach the trade deadline, and if you're not close, you're not remotely close, all right, then sell off. But until then, make the damn playoffs. Be a better team. There's no well, this isn't our year. We're gonna punt till next year. I don't think that's the mindset at all.
No, I don't think so either, but I do think it would show a lot of benefits, especially when you consider some of the names that will be joining the Red Wings next year and the amount of money they'll have, especially, if they do go after that big top free agent this offseason in a Marner or Mikko Rantanen, and you bring in over guys like ASP, and you've got another year of this Buchelnikov, who, by the way, we don't talk enough about, and this kid's tearing shit up in this KHL. But I don't see that. But at some point, I'm wondering if that's something that sits in the back of the head, because I don't see this. I see this team as a bottom 5 team right now, and I don't think that we've seen anything else. We haven't seen anything else this season that would make us think otherwise, other than that they're underperforming. But 30 games in I think it's a pretty legit sample size. So it's just frustrating. I think the most frustrating part for all our fans is how close everything was last year, and how excited we were, and how long it's been for this team, and to come back down to this, your word, Tony, as far as regression, it's really hard to watch. And I don't know what the mindset goes in on for the GM and the coach like that when they're seeing this happen. It's hard to comprehend.
I'll go with a yes. And I think that there is a situation where Yzerman very well could both let the Wings tank and not explain it, frankly speaking, because that's just kind of his MO, is that if he feels that there is a reason to do something, he does not feel the need to explain himself to the media. There are so many other GMs who give their phone numbers to all the media members, and they will answer almost every call. You want to talk about Ken Holland, Jimmy Nill, and I can very well see the team just selling off or continuing as it is until there's a time when, for example, Patrick Kane is coming out of this slump he has where every damn pass is going over his stick and every shot is going over the net, and they find a way to maximize their return for the players. But at the same time, and this is playing a little pop psychology, I suppose, here, is that I have heard oftentimes that when it gets to be free agency, Yzerman can't help himself because there is a competitiveness to him and there is a competitive edge that he has that prevents him from not making moves, maybe to the overextent and detriment of the long-term future of the team in terms of like signing guys like Kopp and Sherratt and so on to those long-term contracts. So there is supposedly, if we are to believe those who are in the know and who have been plugged in long-term, there's supposedly a lot of competitiveness within Yzerman, and I guess we are at the point in the season, hitting the 30 game mark, where the options are hope for a personnel move, hope for a coaching change, and hope that the competitive nature of the general manager plays into all of this, and he decides that he's tired of watching the same BS that we are.
I think that the most poetic way for this season to go is that this is the first season of the rebuild that the collective agreement was that this team had a legit shot at the playoffs. So I think it would be very poetic that this is the year that they get that high-end elite lottery talent that they have missed out on every year of the rebuild for one reason or another. Now, obviously, that means this season is a big disappointment compared to what we thought it was going to be. But to the point about going out and acquiring players to increase competitiveness and not drag out the rebuild any longer than it needs to be dragged out. The types of players that the Red Wings need are typically only found at the top of the draft. And there's really only one way to get them. So I think that, to kind of circle back to Evan's question of, does he just let things play out? I think to some extent, yes. And I think that's kind of what he's doing right now. Obviously, like I said 10 minutes ago, he's obviously trying to tinker with things and see if there's, possibilities out there. But at the end of the day, I think, if he would have fired Derek Lalonde 2 weeks ago after that California trip, nobody would have batted an eyelash. But he chose to keep him around, and he's still keeping him around. And while we're saying that Toronto seems like a really good, this is the checkpoint, this is the do or die game. It also wouldn't surprise me if they, get blown out 7-1 and Derek Lalonde's still the coach the next day. Because I think that on some level, Yzerman's just kind of got to see what he's got. I mean, I think we know what he has now, but you never know. And then you can plan accordingly, because I think every GM goes into a season. You're right, Evan. I don't think any GM goes into the season wanting to tank. But I do think that every GM at one point of the season becomes realistic about their team and starts thinking about what they need to do to make their team better. For some teams, making their team better means being aggressive at the trade deadline and adding this player and that player and making sure you have the best chance to win the Stanley Cup. Other teams, the best way to make your team better is to make your team worse for a little bit and increase your lottery odds. And unless the Red Wings completely reverse course, they are going to be in the latter group. And I think that Yzerman might kind of risks shooting himself in the foot if he, were to make a Jacob Trouba type of trade right now, and then, a month later start looking at selling players. So maybe the move right now is to just stay put and then reassess as you get into February.
I agree with you on that point, Dan, especially when you consider the fact that the Red Wings are going to be in a great cap situation moving forward here. So I don't think I think we've seen enough out of this team. Obviously, we know this team is not a cup contender, but I don't think it's right yet for this season to go out and make a splashy move if it's just a short-term benefit. The other thing I keep thinking back to, and I feel like we don't talk enough about Patrick Kane, and George, I know you mentioned him too. Like, just thinking back to last season, how many games Patrick Kane really, lit it up for the Red Wings and really scored those big time goals and his playmaking, and he just looks like a completely different player this season. Whether it's pucks off the stick. I mean, George, you said it too. I watched so many games this year where it's just he's having trouble just accepting passes and bringing them in, and it's curious as to how his game has really declined from what we saw last season. And I wonder how much of that is, goes into this. And then when you look at it at the end of the day, this team's only 5 points out of a playoff spot, 30 games in. It's not unrealistic that something could change, but there's no signs that something could change. But that also, again, speaks to the mediocrity of the Eastern Conference. So with that, guys, one thing I did want to note, I want to make sure that our listeners know that in no way or shape or form does the Flying Octopus condone throwing live grenades into player locker rooms. That was just a metaphor. And so don't take that as, we're some kind of crazy group of people. But guys, let's wrap it up here. The Red Wings play Saturday against Toronto, Hockey Night in Canada, something we usually look forward to. I look forward to watching it, but I'm not expecting the greatest of outcomes. Then the Red Wings go to host Philly next Wednesday, and then we'll be back with you on next Thursday. So again, remember you can find us on Twitter at the Flying Octopod. Our YouTube channel is also the Flying Octopod, and now we're finally joined Blue Sky. So there's a lot less porn and just crap to deal with on that site. So if you want to there too and follow us, that would be great. And guys, let's I don't know what to say anymore on these things. The optimism is just drained from my soul. But we'll see you guys next week.
Thanks for listening to the Flying Octopus Podcast. Follow us on YouTube at the Flying Octopus channel and Twitter at Flying Octopod.
We'll see you guys next